You're nothing without me. His voice sliced through the courtroom's heavy silence, dripping with arrogance as he signed the divorce papers with a mocking flourish. The black woman, a poised charity director, sat unflinching, her hands steady despite the weight of his betrayal. She'd endured years of his calculated cruelty, belittling taunts, public humiliation, and whispered racial slurs at elite gatherings that questioned her place as an heiress. Yet in this charged moment, as the judge reached for a sealed envelope bearing her late father's crest, a flicker of hope sparked. Something monumental was about to unravel, poised to shatter his smug facade. This is no ordinary divorce tale. It's a journey of resilience and revelation. Want to know how she turns the tables? Stay tuned, hit subscribe for our latest stories, and share where you're watching from in the comments. Don't miss the shocking truth awaiting. The courtroom buzzed with a low hum of anticipation, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and stale coffee. Veronica sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid, her dark eyes fixed on the grain of the oak surface before her. As a black woman and the director of the Whitmore Foundation, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied the storm raging within. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap, refused to tremble, though her heart thudded with a mix of dread and resolve. Across the room, Nathan lounged in his chair, his tailored suit as sharp as his smirk. His pen twirled between his fingers with a careless arrogance, as if the divorce papers before him were a mere formality, a game he'd already won. "You're nothing without me," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, his voice laced with venomous triumph. The words stung, but Veronica didn't flinch. She'd promised herself she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. For years, she'd endured his calculated cruelty, his subtle jabs at her intelligence in front of their high society friends, his insistence that she dress the part to fit his vision of a trophy wife, and the whispered racial slurs she'd overheard at galas, where guests questioned how a black woman could helm a family empire. Nathan had reveled in those moments, his charm a mask for his ambition to climb the social ladder through her family's legacy. Now as he signed the divorce papers with a flourish, his green eyes flicked toward her, mocking, daring her to crumble. The gavel struck, a sharp crack that silenced the room. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Before we proceed," he said, his voice steady, "there is a matter concerning the estate of the late Mr. Henry Whitmore." Veronica's breath caught. Her father's name, spoken in that formal cadence, felt like a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. Nathan's smirk faltered, just for a moment, as the judge's clerk placed a thick, sealed envelope on the bench. The wax seal bore the unmistakable crest of the Whitmore family, a lion encircled by laurel leaves. Veronica's chest tightened, not from the pain of her unraveling marriage, but from the sudden weight of possibility. What had her father left behind? The courtroom's murmurs grew quieter, the spectators leaning forward. A court assistant, a young woman with a clipboard, whispered to her colleague, "She doesn't look like someone who'd inherit all that." Her tone tinged with skepticism as her eyes darted toward Veronica's deep brown skin and tightly coiled hair. The comment, though hushed, reached Veronica's ears. She clenched her jaw, her resolve hardening. She'd heard such remarks before. Doubts about her place, her worth, her right to carry her father's legacy. But she wouldn't let their bias distract her now, not when something monumental was unfolding. The judge broke the seal with a deliberate motion, the crackle of wax echoing in the stillness. "This is an addendum to Mr. Whitmore's last will," he announced, his eyes scanning the document. "It stipulates that, in the event of marital betrayal, all financial benefits, privileges, and claims extended to the spouse of his daughter, Veronica Whitmore, are to be immediately revoked." Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's pen froze mid-twirl, his knuckles whitening as he gripped it. His confident posture slumped, and for the first time, Veronica saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The man who'd mocked her as nothing now sat rigid, the weight of her father's foresight pressing down on him. Veronica's mind raced back to the years before, to the beginning of her marriage with Nathan. She'd been 24, a young woman navigating the grief of her father's first heart attack, when Nathan entered her life. He was a rising lawyer, all charm and ambition, with a smile that could disarm a room. At a charity gala hosted by the Whitmore Foundation, he'd approached her with a glass of champagne and a compliment about her speech. "You have a way of making people listen," he'd said, his voice warm, his gaze lingering, just long enough to make her feel seen. Henry, her father, had taken to him immediately, impressed by his polished demeanor and apparent drive. "He's got potential," Henry had said, clapping Nathan on the shoulder after a family dinner. "He'll be good for you." But Clara, Veronica's mother, had been less convinced. One evening, as they washed dishes after Nathan left, Clara's eyes narrowed. "He smiles widest when he talks about money," she'd warned, her voice low. "Watch him, Veronica." Veronica had laughed it off, chalking it up to her mother's protectiveness. She'd wanted so badly to believe in Nathan's love, to trust that his affection was genuine. He'd noticed the little things, the way she fidgeted with her necklace when nervous, her preference for chamomile tea over coffee. He'd made her laugh when the weight of her father's illness felt unbearable. How could someone so attentive be anything but sincere? Yet as the judge's voice brought her back to the present, Veronica realized how blind she'd been. The addendum wasn't just a legal document, it was her father's shield, crafted long before she'd seen Nathan's true colors. The judge continued, "This clause ensures that Veronica Whitmore retains full control of the Whitmore estate, including all business holdings and trusts, free from any spousal interference in the case of proven infidelity." Nathan's face drained of color, his jaw tight. The spectators whispered, their eyes darting between him and Veronica. She felt their scrutiny, the unspoken judgments about her race, her strength, her right to stand here. But she also felt her father's presence, his love reaching across time to protect her. Nathan's lawyer, a wiry man in a pinstripe suit, leaned over, whispering frantically. Nathan shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. Veronica caught his glance, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Where once she'd seen love, now there was only calculation, a man scrambling to salvage his crumbling empire. She thought of the nights she'd spent doubting herself, wondering if she could endure his mockery, his insistence that she was only valuable because of his name. The memory of one gala stood out, Nathan laughing with a guest who'd remarked, "She's lucky to have you. Not everyone would take a chance on someone like her." The racial undertone had stung, but Nathan's nod of agreement had cut deeper. The judge set the envelope aside, his gaze stern. "This changes the nature of these proceedings," he said. "We will reconvene after I review the full implications of this addendum." The gavel struck again, and the room erupted into hushed chatter. Veronica exhaled, her hands finally relaxing in her lap. Sophia, her childhood friend and lawyer, leaned close, her blue eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. "Your father knew," she whispered. "He's still looking out for you." Veronica nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her father's legacy, for the truth he'd safeguarded. As the courtroom began to clear, Nathan stood, his movements jerky, his charm replaced by a barely contained fury. He shot Veronica one last look, a mix of defiance and fear, before storming out with his lawyer trailing behind. Veronica remained seated, letting the weight of the moment settle. The court assistant's earlier whisper echoed in her mind, a reminder of the biases she'd faced her whole life. But today, those biases wouldn't define her. Her father's will had given her a weapon, one that could dismantle Nathan's arrogance brick by brick. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a battle she was finally ready to fight. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the seismic shift in Veronica's world. She stepped toward the courthouse doors, Sophia at her side, and felt a spark of hope ignite. The truth was emerging, and with it, the strength her father had always seen in her. What lay ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Veronica felt the ground steady beneath her feet. The story of her marriage, her betrayal, and her resilience was only just beginning to unfold. Years before the courtroom drama, the city glittered under a summer evening sky, alive with the clink of champagne glasses and the hum of elite conversation. Veronica, then 24, stood at the edge of a grand ballroom, her deep brown skin radiant against the emerald silk of her gown. As the rising star of the Whitmore Foundation, she delivered a speech on her father's charity work, her voice steady, her presence commanding. The crowd applauded, but her eyes caught a stranger's gaze, a man with a disarming smile, holding a glass of champagne as he approached. "You have a gift for making people listen," Nathan said, his voice warm, his green eyes lingering with admiration. Veronica felt a flutter, a rare moment of being seen not just as Henry Whitmore's daughter, but as herself. Nathan was a lawyer, polished and ambitious, with a charm that seemed to light up the room. He asked about her work, her passions, noticing the way she twisted her necklace when nervous, a habit she hadn't realized anyone else had seen. By the end of the night, he'd secured an invitation to a family dinner at the Whitmore estate. Henry, Veronica's father, a towering black man whose success in business had built a legacy, took to Nathan immediately. Over roast lamb and candlelight, Henry clapped Nathan's shoulder, his deep laugh filling the room. "You've got fire, son," he said. "You'll go far." Veronica watched, her heart swelling with hope that she'd found someone who fit into her world. But Clara, her mother, was not so easily swayed. As they cleared the table after Nathan left, Clara's hands paused over a plate, her eyes narrowing. "He smiles widest when he talks about money," she said, her voice low, laced with caution. "Watch him, Veronica." The warning felt like a pinprick, sharp but fleeting. Veronica brushed it off, her laughter light. "You're just protective, Mom," she said, wanting to believe in the fairy tale Nathan seemed to offer. She was young, grieving her father's recent heart attack, and Nathan's attention felt like a balm. He remembered her love for chamomile tea, brought her books on art history, her secret passion, and made her laugh with stories of his small-town upbringing, a world away from her family's wealth. Their courtship was a whirlwind of stolen moments and grand gestures. Nathan proposed 6 months later, under a canopy of stars at a Whitmore Foundation gala, his words earnest as he knelt before her. "You're my future," he said, slipping a diamond ring onto her finger. The crowd cheered, but Veronica noticed a guest, an older woman in pearls, whispering to her companion, "She's lucky to have him. Not everyone would choose someone like her." The words, tinged with racial undertones, stung, but Nathan's hand squeezed hers and she pushed the hurt aside. She wanted to believe in love, in the life they'd build together. The wedding was a spectacle, covered by local papers as the union of a rising lawyer and the Whitmore heiress. Veronica felt like a princess, her white gown trailing across the cathedral floor. But as the months turned to years, cracks began to form. Nathan's charm, once a beacon, became a tool for control. He insisted on hosting lavish parties, urging Veronica to wear dresses that screamed wealth, silks and sequins that felt foreign to her simple tastes. "You're a Whitmore," he'd say, his tone sharp when she resisted. "Act like it." The parties were filled with his colleagues and socialites, people who smiled at Veronica but whispered behind her back. At one event, a guest, emboldened by wine, remarked to Nathan, "You've done well for yourself marrying into this family." Nathan's laugh, devoid of defense for her, cut deeper than the comment itself. Veronica began to feel like a prop in Nathan's ambition. He pushed her to host events for people she barely knew, to mingle with those who saw her as an anomaly, a black woman wielding power in their exclusive circles. One night, at a charity auction, she overheard a couple murmuring, "How does someone like her run a foundation like that?" The words echoed the skepticism she'd faced her whole life, but Nathan's response, a casual shrug, as if he agreed, twisted the knife. She confronted him later, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you say anything?" Nathan's eyes rolled. "Don't be so sensitive," he said, dismissing her pain. "It's just how people talk." The shift was gradual but undeniable. Nathan's attentiveness faded, replaced by a fixation on appearances. He'd critique her speeches for the foundation, suggesting she tone it down to avoid seeming too assertive. He'd rearrange her schedule to fit his social climbing, insisting she attend events that served his career, not hers. Veronica, once confident in her father's boardroom, began to doubt herself. She'd look in the mirror, her coiled hair and dark skin, a reminder of the strength her parents had instilled. Yet Nathan's words chipped away at that foundation. "You're lucky I'm here to guide you," he'd say, his tone patronizing, as if her family's legacy were his creation. The breaking point came at a Whitmore Foundation gala, an event Veronica had poured her heart into organizing. She stood at the podium thanking donors for supporting literacy programs in underserved communities, her father's passion. Nathan, mingling with guests, was the picture of charm, but as Veronica stepped off stage, she saw him across the room, his arm around a woman in a red dress. Their laughter was intimate, her hand lingering on his chest. The crowd's eyes followed, some smirking, others whispering. "Isn't that his wife over there?" Someone muttered, the words dripping with pity. Veronica's face burned, not from jealousy, but from the public humiliation. She felt the weight of every stare, every judgment about her worth, her race, her place in this world Nathan had crafted. She stood frozen, her heart pounding, as Nathan met her gaze. For a moment she thought he'd rush to her side, explain. Instead he raised his glass, a mocking toast, and turned back to the woman. The room seemed to close in, the murmurs growing louder, the racial undertones sharper. "She doesn't belong in that dress," a guest whispered, the words a dagger to Veronica's pride. She clutched her necklace, her fingers trembling, but she refused to let tears fall. This wasn't love, it was betrayal, laid bare for all to see. She left the gala alone, the city's lights blurring through the car window, her resolve hardening. Nathan thought he could break her, but he'd underestimated the strength her father had nurtured. That night, as she sat in her darkened apartment, the memory of Clara's warning echoed. "He smiles widest when he talks about money." Veronica realized her mother had seen what she'd been too blind to notice. Nathan's love had been a performance, his ambition fueled by her family's wealth and status. She thought of her father, his warm hand on hers, his belief in her strength. "You're a Whitmore," he'd say, his voice a steady anchor. "Never forget what that means." As the city hummed outside, Veronica felt a spark ignite within her. She wasn't just Henry's daughter. She was a woman ready to reclaim her dignity. The gala had been the final straw, the moment she knew she couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. The city's autumn air carried a sharp chill as Veronica stepped into her apartment, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The memory of Nathan's mocking toast at the gala still burned, but she refused to let it consume her. She was done being his prop. With a steadying breath, she dialed Sophia, her childhood friend, and a fierce lawyer whose loyalty had never wavered. "I'm filing for divorce," Veronica said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. Sophia's response was immediate, her tone resolute. "You deserve better than him. I'll handle everything." The decision felt like a lifeline, a chance to reclaim the woman she'd been before Nathan's cruelty dulled her spark. But as Veronica hung up, she knew Nathan wouldn't let go easily. He thrived on control, and she was about to challenge it. The divorce filing unleashed a storm. Nathan, once charming, turned vicious, wielding his charisma like a weapon to tarnish Veronica's name. Whispers began to spread through their social circles, lies that painted her as emotionally unstable, unfit to lead the Whitmore Foundation. At a coffee shop, she overheard a former acquaintance murmur, "She's always been too dramatic for that role," the words laced with a racial undertone that questioned her competence as a black woman in power. Veronica's jaw tightened, but she kept walking, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "You're a Whitmore. Never let them dim your light." She clung to that, even as Nathan's campaign grew darker. He escalated his attacks, targeting the heart of her father's legacy, the Whitmore Foundation. As its director, Veronica had poured her soul into continuing Henry's mission of supporting underserved communities. But Nathan, leveraging his connections, sowed doubt among the board. One morning, she arrived at the foundation's sleek downtown office to find an email waiting, a petition signed by several board members demanding her removal as director. The accusations were brutal: mismanagement, erratic behavior, neglect of duties. Each word felt like a betrayal, orchestrated by the man who'd once vowed to love her. She sat at her desk, her hands trembling, the weight of isolation pressing down. Had Nathan turned everyone against her? The board meeting was set for a crisp afternoon, the conference room heavy with tension. Veronica entered, her tailored blazer a shield against the cold stares of the board members, men and women who'd once respected her father's vision. Nathan's influence was palpable. She could see it in their averted gazes, their whispered conversations. The chairman, a stern man named Richard, opened the meeting with a grave tone. "We've received serious concerns about your leadership," he said, sliding the petition across the table. Veronica's heart sank, but she met his gaze, her voice steady. "These claims are baseless. My commitment to this foundation is unwavering." A younger board member, Ellen, leaned forward, her tone skeptical. "Some of us wonder if you're truly equipped to handle an organization of this scale," she said, her words dripping with condescension, a subtle nod to the biases Veronica had faced her whole career. The room grew stifling, the air thick with judgment. Veronica felt the weight of their doubts, not just about her leadership, but about her right to occupy this space as a black woman. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, an older board member, James, stood. His weathered face, etched with years of loyalty to Henry, commanded attention. "I've known Veronica since she was a child," he said, his voice gravelly but firm, "and I knew Henry. He built this foundation on integrity, not greed. He'd never tolerate a single cent of dirty money tainting his work." His eyes swept the room, lingering on those who'd signed the petition. "I won't turn my back on his daughter." The room shifted, the momentum wavering. James's words were a lifeline, a reminder of her father's trust in her. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence in Nathan's narrative faltering. Veronica seized the moment, her voice rising with quiet conviction. "This foundation is my father's legacy, and I've dedicated my life to it. If you question my leadership, look at the numbers. Our programs have doubled their impact in 3 years." She slid a report across the table, her hands steady now. "These accusations aren't about my performance. They're about someone trying to control what isn't his." The meeting adjourned without a vote, and the petition was tabled for further review. As Veronica left, James caught her arm, his eyes kind but fierce. "Your father would be proud," he said softly. "Keep fighting." She nodded, a lump in her throat. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope, but the battle was far from over. Nathan's reach extended beyond the boardroom. At a charity event days later, she overheard a donor whisper to another, "They say she's losing her grip, too emotional for the job." The comment, steeped in stereotypes about her race and gender, was Nathan's doing, a calculated move to erode her credibility. Veronica's nights grew sleepless, her apartment a sanctuary turned battlefield. She'd pace the living room, replaying the board meeting, the whispers, the petition. Nathan's lies were relentless, seeping into every corner of her life. He'd charmed mutual friends into distancing themselves, leaving her isolated. One evening, a former colleague texted her, "Is it true you've been mismanaging funds?" The accusation, baseless yet insidious, was another of Nathan's fabrications. Veronica's fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to respond, but she set it down. She wouldn't play his game. Instead, she called Sophia, her voice cracking. "He's trying to destroy me, Sophia. Piece by piece." Sophia arrived within the hour, her briefcase stuffed with legal documents. "He's playing dirty because he's scared," she said, her blue eyes blazing with determination. "We'll fight this, Veronica. You're not alone." They spent hours strategizing, mapping out Nathan's tactics, his charm offensive with the board, his whispers to the press, his manipulation of their social circle. Sophia's confidence was an anchor, but Veronica couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her. What if Nathan's lies won? What if she lost the foundation, her father's dream? The stakes felt impossibly high, her dignity hanging by a thread. The next blow came at a community fundraiser where Veronica was set to speak. As she approached the podium, a reporter from a local paper cornered her. "Is it true you're facing a mental health crisis?" he asked, his tone smug, his question a clear echo of Nathan's smear campaign. Veronica's pulse raced, but she forced a smile. "I'm here to talk about the foundation's work, not rumors," she said, sidestepping him. The crowd applauded her speech, but she felt their eyes, some curious, some judgmental, probing for cracks in her armor. Later, she overheard a guest murmur, "She's tough, but maybe too tough for her own good. The words a veiled jab at her strength as a black woman, as if resilience were a flaw. Veronica returned home that night, her resolve tested but unbroken. She stood by her window, the city skyline a glittering reminder of her father's legacy. Henry had built the Whitmore Foundation from nothing, defying the same biases she now faced. She thought of his warm hand on hers, his voice steady. "You're a Whitmore. Never let them dim your light." The memory fueled her. Nathan wanted her to crumble, to doubt herself, but she refused. Sophia's words echoed, "You're not alone." With her friend's support and her father's legacy at her back, Veronica knew she had to keep fighting. The board meeting had been a small victory, James's stand a crack in Nathan's armor. But the war was far from won, and Veronica was ready to face whatever Nathan threw next. The city's winter dusk cast long shadows across the Whitmore estate, its sprawling halls silent except for the faint creak of floorboards under Veronica's steps. She stood in her father's study, a room untouched since his passing, where the scent of cedar and old books lingered like a quiet embrace. The weight of Nathan's relentless attacks, his lies about her mental state, his manipulation of the Whitmore Foundation board, pressed heavily on her. Yet James's stand at the board meeting had sparked a flicker of hope, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Tonight she sought answers, something to counter Nathan's venom. Her fingers traced the spines of her father's leather-bound journals, each one a testament to his meticulous nature. Then behind a row of books, she felt a cold metal edge, a hidden safe, its lock gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Veronica's heart quickened. She'd never known about the safe, but instinct told her it held something vital. She tried combinations, her birthday, her parents' anniversary, until, on a whim, she entered the date of her first speech for the foundation. The lock clicked and the door swung open. Inside lay a single leather ledger, its pages yellowed, and a sealed letter bearing her name in Henry's precise handwriting. She opened the letter first, her breath catching as she read, "My dearest Veronica, you'll need this when the truth comes to light. Trust your strength. Love, Dad." Tears stung her eyes, not from grief, but from the realization that her father had foreseen this battle, arming her even from beyond the grave. The ledger was a revelation. Page after page detailed financial transactions, but not just the foundations. There were entries about Nathan. Large sums, disguised as business expenses, had been siphoned from the Whitmore estate into accounts Veronica didn't recognize. Dates, amounts, and cryptic notes in Henry's hand painted a damning picture. Nathan had been quietly bleeding the family's wealth for years. Veronica's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her father's foresight both a gift and a burden. This wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon, one that could unravel Nathan's carefully crafted lies. She clutched the ledger to her chest, whispering, "You saw him, Dad. You always did." She called Sophia immediately, her voice urgent but steady. "I found something. You need to see this." Within an hour, Sophia arrived, her coat dusted with snow, her eyes sharp with anticipation. They spread the ledger across the study's oak desk, the firelight casting shadows over the pages. Sophia's fingers traced the entries, her brow furrowing. "Veronica, these are transfers, hundreds of thousands funneled through shell companies. Nathan's name is all over this." She paused, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "Your father was tracking him. This is proof of theft, of betrayal." Veronica nodded, her resolve hardening. "We need to make sure it's airtight," she said. "He'll fight this." Sophia wasted no time. She took the ledger to a forensic accountant, a colleague she trusted, to verify the transactions. Meanwhile, Nathan's campaign against Veronica intensified. The local press, swayed by his charm, ran a story with a headline that cut deep. "Whitmore heiress faces questions over leadership stability." The article featured a photo of Veronica at a fundraiser, her expression stern, captioned with a subtle jab, "Can she handle the pressure?" The implication was clear, rooted in stereotypes about her race and gender. Too emotional, too volatile to lead. Veronica read the article in her apartment, her stomach churning, but instead of despair, she felt anger. Nathan thought he could bury her with lies, but her father's ledger was a lifeline, a chance to fight back. The accountant's report came back within days, confirming the ledger's authenticity. Every transaction matched bank records, and Henry's handwriting was unmistakable. Sophia, pacing in Veronica's living room, laid out their strategy. "We'll submit this to the court," she said, her voice steady. "It proves Nathan's theft, his manipulation of the estate. Once this comes out, his credibility is finished." Veronica nodded, but a shadow of doubt lingered. Nathan was cunning, his charm a weapon that had fooled so many. "What if he twists this?" she asked. Sophia's eyes met hers, fierce with conviction. "He can't twist the truth when it's written in your father's hand. We've got him." Outside, Nathan's campaign grew bolder. He appeared at a charity event, his arm around a new ally, a prominent donor who'd once supported the foundation. Photographers snapped pictures, and the press painted him as a victim of Veronica's instability. At a downtown cafe, Veronica overheard two women discussing the story. "She's always been out of her depth," one said, her tone dripping with condescension. "A woman like her running a foundation. No wonder it's falling apart." The words steeped in racial bias were Nathan's narrative taking root. Veronica's grip tightened on her coffee cup, but she refused to let their judgment define her. She thought of her father's letter, his words a beacon. "Trust your strength." Sophia worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the ledger with bank statements and preparing affidavits. She enlisted a handwriting expert to authenticate Henry's notes, ensuring no loophole remained. Veronica, meanwhile, faced the daily grind of Nathan's attacks. At a community outreach event, a reporter approached her. His question pointed, "Are you stepping down from the foundation due to personal issues?" The assumption, fueled by Nathan's lies, stung, but Veronica smiled tightly. "My focus is on the foundation's mission," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Rumors don't change facts." The crowd applauded, but she felt their scrutiny, the weight of their doubts about her as a black woman in power. One evening, alone in her apartment, Veronica sat with the ledger, rereading her father's letter. The city's skyline glittered outside, a reminder of Henry's legacy. He'd built the Whitmore Foundation against all odds, defying the same biases she now faced. His words, "You'll need this when the truth comes to light," felt like a promise, a shield against Nathan's venom. She thought of the board meeting, James's stand, and Sophia's unwavering support. For the first time in months, hope surged through her, a quiet fire that burned away her doubts. Nathan had underestimated her, but more importantly, he'd underestimated her father. Sophia called with an update, her voice crackling with excitement. The accountant found a second set of accounts linked to Nathan. He was sloppy, Veronica. "We've got bank records, transfer dates, and even emails. This is ironclad." Veronica exhaled, her heart pounding. "When do we take it to court?" she asked. "Soon," Sophia replied. "We're building a case that'll bury him." They spent the night strategizing, mapping out every detail. Veronica felt a shift within her, a reclaiming of the strength Nathan had tried to strip away. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her father's legacy, for the truth he'd safeguarded. As the days passed, Nathan's confidence seemed unshaken. He posted on social media a carefully curated image of a man wronged, garnering sympathy from those unaware of his deceit. At a downtown gala, Veronica overheard a guest murmur, "She's dragging him through the mud. Poor guy." The comment, laced with assumptions about her motives, was another of Nathan's manipulations. But Veronica no longer felt the sting as sharply. The ledger, her father's letter, and Sophia's resolve were her armor. She stood taller, her gaze steady, knowing the truth was on her side. The final piece fell into place when Sophia secured a witness, a former colleague of Nathan's, who'd seen him funnel funds. "He bragged about it," the colleague told them, his voice low. "Thought he was untouchable." Veronica's heart raced, but her resolve was unshakable. The ledger wasn't just a record, it was her father's final gift, a tool to dismantle Nathan's lies. As she closed the study's door, the letter in her hand, she whispered, "Thank you, Dad." The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Veronica felt ready to face it head-on, armed with the truth her father had left behind. The courthouse loomed under a gray spring sky, its stone facade as unyielding as the truth Veronica carried within her. She walked through the doors with a newfound steadiness, her shoulders squared, her dark eyes blazing with purpose. Gone was the woman who'd once trembled under Nathan's mockery. In her place stood the director of the Whitmore Foundation, a black woman ready to reclaim her father's legacy. Sophia strode beside her, clutching a briefcase that held Henry's ledger, bank records, and the testimony of a witness who'd seen Nathan's deceit firsthand. The air inside buzzed with anticipation, the crowd's whispers a low hum as Veronica took her seat. Nathan, already at the defendant's table, wore a mask of confidence, his tailored suit pristine, but his eyes darted nervously, betraying the cracks in his facade. The judge, his silver hair catching the courtroom's harsh light, opened the proceedings with a nod. Nathan's lawyer, a slick man named Carter, launched into a familiar narrative, painting Veronica as erratic, unfit to lead. "My client has endured undue stress," Carter said, his voice smooth, "caused by Mrs. Whitmore's inability to manage her personal and professional life." The words were a rehearsed echo of Nathan's lies, designed to undermine her credibility. Veronica felt the room's eyes on her, some tinged with the same racial bias she'd faced for years. Doubts about her strength, her competence, her right to power. But she sat tall, her hands steady, anchored by the truth in Sophia's briefcase. Sophia rose, her presence commanding, her blue eyes sharp. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, "we have evidence that disproves every claim made by Mr. Whitmore and reveals his own misconduct." She placed Henry's ledger on the table, its worn leather a stark contrast to the polished surroundings. This ledger, written in the hand of the late Henry Whitmore, documents unauthorized transfers made by Nathan Whitmore, siphoning funds from the Whitmore estate for personal gain. She laid out bank statements and an affidavit from Nathan's former colleague, each piece a brick in the case against him. The courtroom stilled, the weight of her words sinking in. Nathan shifted, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. Carter objected, his voice rising. "This is circumstantial at best, Your Honor. The ledger could be fabricated." Sophia didn't flinch. "The handwriting has been verified by an expert, and the transactions match bank records. Mr. Whitmore's colleague has sworn under oath that he bragged about these schemes, believing himself untouchable." She turned to the judge, her tone unwavering. "This isn't just betrayal of a marriage. It's theft from a family legacy." Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's face flushed crimson, his charm unraveling as the truth took hold. The judge's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the ledger, his expression grave. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, his voice like steel, "do you deny these transactions?" Nathan opened his mouth, but his usual eloquence failed him. He stammered, his eyes darting to Carter, who could only shake his head. The judge continued. "This evidence suggests not only financial misconduct, but a deliberate attempt to deceive this court. All claims by Mr. Whitmore against his wife are dismissed. Furthermore, I grant sole ownership of the Whitmore estate and its assets to Veronica Whitmore, as stipulated in her father's will." He paused, his gaze piercing. "Mr. Whitmore, your actions warrant further investigation. This matter will be referred to the authorities for potential criminal charges." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Nathan shot to his feet, his voice raw with fury. "You think you've won, Veronica?" he spat, pointing across the room. "You're nothing without me." The words, once a weapon, now sounded desperate, hollow. Veronica stood slowly, her gaze locking onto his. "No, Nathan," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I'm finally everything without you." The silence that followed was electric, her words a verdict in themselves. The judge's gavel struck, demanding order, but Nathan's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling under the weight of his exposure. As the court adjourned, Veronica felt a swell of emotions, relief, triumph, and a quiet grief for the years lost to Nathan's deceit. Sophia squeezed her hand, her smile one of pride. "You did it," she whispered. Veronica nodded, her throat tight. Her father's ledger, his foresight, had been her shield, turning Nathan's lies into dust. She stepped outside, the spring air crisp against her skin, only to be swarmed by reporters. Microphones thrust toward her, Questions flying. How does it feel to win? What's next for the Whitmore Foundation? One reporter, his tone edged with skepticism, asked, "How did someone like you pull this off?" The question, laced with racial undertones, stung, but Veronica's response was steady. "The truth always wins," she said, her voice clear. "My father taught me that." The reporters dispersed, but the city's pulse seemed to quicken, as if sensing the shift in Veronica's world. Nathan was escorted away, his head bowed, his charm shattered. The press, once his ally, turned on him, headlines already shifting to expose his crimes. Veronica, however, felt no need to gloat. She returned to the Whitmore Foundation the next day, her head held high. The board members who doubted her offered apologies, their earlier petition now a footnote in her victory. She called a meeting, not to dwell on the past, but to chart a new path. "This foundation," she told them, her voice steady, "will focus on empowering women who face betrayal and hardship. That's my father's legacy, and it's mine to carry forward." The restructuring was swift. Veronica launched programs for survivors of abuse, drawing on her own journey to inspire others. Each initiative felt like a tribute to Henry, his belief in her strength woven into every decision. The foundation's impact grew, its mission resonating with communities across the city. Donors returned inspired by her resilience, and the whispers of doubt faded. One evening, Veronica returned to her father's study, the room where she'd found the ledger. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the bookshelves. She placed the ledger on its shelf, its pages now a relic of her triumph. Standing by the window, she watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, a quiet peace settling over her. She touched the letter Henry had left, its words etched in her heart. "Trust your strength," she whispered. "Thank you, Dad," her voice soft but sure. The room was silent, but she felt his presence, a guiding light that had carried her through the darkest storm. Veronica was no longer the woman defined by Nathan's cruelty. She was a leader, a daughter, a symbol of resilience, her dignity restored. The city's skyline stretched before her, a canvas of possibility, and she knew her journey, her father's legacy, was far from over. Thank you for joining us on Veronica's incredible journey from betrayal to triumph. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, truth, and the strength to rise above adversity. What do you think? Did Nathan's downfall deliver the justice Veronica deserved? Or is true karma living with the knowledge that he lost someone who embodied strength and dignity? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're tuning in from. Your support means everything. If this tale of courage inspired you, don't miss our next story, packed with more twists and revelations that will keep you hooked. Hit subscribe to stay updated on our latest videos, and join us again for another gripping narrative that celebrates the power of standing tall. Thank you for being part of our community. We can't wait to see you in the next chapter.